Hello everyone. This video is about the visual note assignment, which is focusing on the six kingdoms. This is your Unit 1 assignment. This will take up most of Unit 1, so it is most of the content. And what you're creating here is a visual note. A visual note allows you to think critically and make connections between different characteristics of the six kingdoms. So what you're focusing on is phylogeny, morphology, anatomical and physiological characteristics. And those words hopefully are comfortable now, but if not, please do make sure to add them to your vocabulary. So your learning goals for this are to be able to explain the different taxonomy and evolutionary relationships, which is called phylogeny, compare the structures and functions of different organisms in each of the six kingdoms, distinguish anatomical and physiological characteristics. So this is things like their habitat, physical structures, how they reproduce, things like that. And lastly, to draw biological diagrams. Now, you don't necessarily need to draw them because this is a digital assignment, but to be able to understand them and read them. So what you're going to be doing here is you're going to be creating a visual note, and I'll show you what a visual note looks like. Here I've just given you some ideas of what you should do in a visual note and maybe what you shouldn't do. I've also provided some resources for other visual notes so you can see them. So if you are doing this on paper, my suggestion is to use a pencil and eraser. You don't need to color it just because it'll take a long time to color. You're welcome to, of course, if you feel the color will help communicate what you're trying to communicate. I did put that there is a visual note how-to book, so you can use that for ideas. Use the internet and our notes to find ideas for images that you can be using, and then you can also print out images to put them on, but you should be labeling them on your own. So you should have the labels on there to show that you understand them. Now on the right side, I'm putting here you shouldn't plan too much. The whole point of a visual note is that it is sort of organic. It comes out the way it's meant to come out. It's not something you have to plan like a poster. It's not really meant to be that. You're not being graded on how artistic you are. If you've seen my drawings, I'm not a good drawer, so I'm not grading you on how well you can draw. I'm grading you on the other criteria, which we'll get to. And lastly, you're not expected to include terminology we haven't covered. So when you do your biological diagram, there may be words in there that you put in, and you're not necessarily expected to explain them because you might not have covered that in this course. So here are some ideas of how to create a visual note. So I just want to be clear, a visual note is not a note that looks nice. So in other words, it's not a note that you write like a regular note and then you throw in a little bit of colors and some stars and stuff to make it look pretty. That's not what a visual note is. A visual note is you're taking ideas and turning them into visual representations. So instead of just writing a word, you're using a representation to show that idea instead of actually just writing the idea. So here is just some ideas of things you can look at. So lettering plays a big role. So how you write lettering, you can use this to split up ideas. Things I've seen before, people will take something. So like they'll take I don't know, morphology, something like that, and they'll always give it the same font when they write it. And so they'll just do that all the time, and that will help them to show an idea, because then as you look around the note, I can always see that when I see this lettering, I know it means that. The bullets are another strategy, so how you bullet ideas. Again, it's not meant to be lists and text, but it is just creative ways to show that. Framing is really useful. You'll frame things to sort of make them pop out at you. Connectors are also really useful. Part of a visual note is showing the connections, and hopefully this unit you're realizing we are classifying the six kingdoms. They're all related in some way, shape, or form. Shadows bring a lot to it. If you add shadows, you're just bringing that depth, and it really changes how a note can look. People, if you include people in there, sometimes it's things like this one here where it's just a person holding something, but it's just, you know, this is, to me, if I see this on there, it's probably you're trying to show us this is important. This is a very key fact, and I want to sort of make it stand out more than if I just write it in this list of all the other things that are in this list. And then there's some other visual effects here just to get you thinking about how you can communicate it. So this is an idea of a visual note. So this is Twitter for beginners. So basically, I mean, as I'm reading this, I'll sort of explain what I'm looking at. So the first thing is why, which pops out right away. Like, why would you do this? So basically we have this little cute thing here. To be honest, I have no idea what this is, but then I see there's another one over here. So I think these are just connectors to help me connect. Okay, why? Well, let's go over here. To watch things, to increase my network, to increase my visibility. So notice that that's very specific and clear. And instead of just writing the word increase, they're even using these arrows because visually that's what it looks like. And then end enjoy with a little smiley face. Again, even without reading it, I saw the smiley face. I know that means people do it for fun. Yes, but how? And then notice this connector. So it's telling me which way to go, because otherwise I might just jump over here and not understand what's happening. So here, I'm jumping down here. And so then I start to see, oh, okay, we have this little structure here, and I'm using that, and I'll logically kind of follow it in order. Little things like this. So there is a typo here, which I did notice. So characters is spelled wrong. But again, taking a simple thing like 140 characters and making that pop out at you. And then they're introducing other things like vines and stuff like that down here, etc., etc. So here is the link that I got this one from. You can just Google visual notes. You'll see so many examples, and you're welcome to borrow anything sort of structurally that you want, because that's the point of a visual note, is let's make it visual instead of just listing things. They could have listed, especially this bottom part, like this 1, 2, 3, 4. They could have literally just wrote like, 1, here's the thing, 2, here's the thing, 3 and 4, but it's no longer visual like that. It's not popping out at you. It's not really interesting anymore. This way you can see there's this big progression, and I can follow along with that. So that's the idea of a visual note. So that's hopefully what it would end up. It doesn't have to look like this. That's not what I'm trying to say. But this hopefully gives you the idea that it's not just taking something like a list and just making it look nice by adding some little pictures here and there. Like, that's not the point. The point is to change the way that you're communicating the ideas. This is a different one. This is for coffee, which if you know anything about me, I drink coffee all the time, so that's why I picked this one. Again, it's split up into sections, which is very useful, because then I can see, and again, notice the fonts. I can see 2, 3, 4, 5, and all the titles are very obvious because the font is very specific. So right away, even just glancing at this, I can see, okay, there's 5 things on here. And it's things like that make a visual note really pop out at you. Obviously, the big picture of coffee, the picture of different types of nuts here, a meditation picture. These are all things that will help you to kind of communicate the information a bit better. So this here at the bottom, this is your rubric. So I'm going to take a couple minutes to explain this. So it's split into the 4 categories from the course outline video. So knowledge and understanding, thinking, investigation, and communication. There is no application in this particular assignment, so that's why they don't have that section. So for each one, what I've done is I split it up into the 4 levels. So if you're not familiar with the 4 levels, a level 4 is an 80% and above. A level 3 is 70 to 79%. A level 2 is 60 to 69%, and a level 1 is 50 to 59. There is a level below that, which is an R level, which means that you're not meeting the expectations. I don't even put it on here because I don't imagine anyone is aiming for that, but it would basically be you're not accomplishing things even at the level 1 level. So for each one, I wrote down what I'm looking for. So for anatomy and physiology, I wrote, did I include all necessary information for each kingdom? And these questions are designed for you to be a little checklist of, did I do that? So what I encourage you to do with this material or with this rubric is to use it yourself. So use it, read the question, look at the differences, and figure out, did you actually do that? How would you grade yourself? Or be realistic and say, well, I didn't really go into much detail there, so I'm probably not getting a 4. I might be even getting a 2. As you look among the 3 or among the 4 categories, you'll see I use different words. So level 1 is usually you're stating something. So stating just means you say it. So you state some of the differences between kingdoms. So, plants don't move, animals move. That's stating, right? That's a level 1. All you did is say that. You haven't really done anything different. Explaining is different. So you can say, well, animals move, and they use this movement to hunt or to hide from predators. They are able to move around their environment, etc., etc. Now you're in the explanations. Analyzing is a bit different now, so now you're going into more specific examples. So that's the other part I'm looking for here is specific examples. So level 3, you're going into much more detail than that. So you're saying, well, if I'm comparing animals and plants, plants are stationary and therefore they have different mechanisms they use to help protect themselves because of where they live, because they don't have the ability to move around. Animals, on the other hand, because they can move, they have different mechanisms. Usually they use behavioral mechanisms, etc., etc., etc. And level 4 is when you examine things. So meaning that you're not just analyzing it as I just did, you're going into a lot more specific detail. And a really good way to do this is to use specific species as examples. So, you know, here in Australia, not here, I'm not in Australia, so I'm in Toronto, but in Australia, there are kangaroos, and kangaroos live in wherever they live. I picked a bad example. I don't know anything about kangaroos, but they live in the plains, and they have very strong legs, which allow them to get away from, you know, predators, things like that. They eat this certain animal or plant or whatever they eat, etc., etc. This plant, on the other hand, it is different because it's a plant. It is able to stay where it is. It has these spines on it because that protects it from being eaten, things like that. And as I'm talking, a better example would have been if I picked an animal that ate a certain plant and I talked about both of them. That would probably be a better example. So that's an example, again, of examining. You're going into a lot more specific detail. Again, you're only picking really 1 or 2 species from each kingdom because each kingdom has, you know, thousands or more species, but you're using this to show how well you understand them. So for each one, that's what you're doing. I'm not going to read through all of them, but for phylogeny, did you identify the evolutionary relationship? So you've seen the phylogenetic trees of the 6 kingdoms. That should be in your visual notes somewhere. So that could be where you sort of draw it on the side. I've seen people incorporate it where their entire thing is a phylogenetic tree, and each section is one of the kingdoms. So that's another idea. The structure. So did you analyze the data and choose appropriate structures to organize ideas? So part of the visual note, again, is how did you communicate? And did you think of ideas that best communicate whatever you were trying to say? So instead of a list for something, maybe a graph would have been better, or a Venn diagram, or a mind map, or a concept map, or something like that. For text, did you use distinct text that emphasize differences? So here I find a lot of people will do things like I'm just going to underline certain things to kind of show they're important. Again, as I showed you in the beginning, these can be much more detailed than that, and that's what I'm looking for. And the point of this is to set ideas apart and emphasize important words or concepts. Images, again, it's a visual note, so it's in the name. How did you do images? And the idea of an image is to translate a concept. So you're not putting a smiley face because, you know, you feel like saying, hey, I you know, look at my work, it's happy. You're putting a smiley face because it's meant to represent something. It's meant to represent happiness, for example, which probably won't apply to this assignment. And the last one, the biological representations. As a reminder, you should have a drawing from each of the 6 kingdoms. You are welcome to borrow one from the internet, but if you do that, you need a reference to go with it. So please make sure you reference. If you're not comfortable with referencing or familiar with it, please let me know. I do mark pretty heavily for that because it is something at the grade 11 level that you should know how to do. So please, if you're not sure how to reference something, ask me. The last thing I'm going to mention, so that is the end of the rubric, is that I am happy to look at these in advance. If you want me to take a look and I can give you some feedback, some ideas, maybe some things I noticed that, hey, that's great, or some ideas that, hey, maybe you should think about how you did this and some other ideas you can try. I don't want the first time I see it to be when I'm marking it, because the problem is if I see something, it could have been, oh, I could have just told you this, and you probably would have come up with another idea very easily, but now I have to mark it, and so now you're going to lose marks. So please do show me things. I'm happy to give as much feedback as I can. You can send it multiple times, so you send it to me, I give you some feedback, you fix it up, send it right back to me and say, okay, now can you look at this? I may ask specifically what you're looking for, so I'm not going to mark it when I do feedback. I'm just going to point out general things, but if you want to say, sir, did I do the text well, I can point out that specifically. So hopefully that's clear, and if you do have any questions, please let me know.